Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. My name is Jessica Seward. I am not Dan Cole, as showing on your screen, but I'm going to introduce him in a few minutes. I am the Director of Customer Marketing at ThreatConnect, and I'm just going to take a few minutes to go over some housekeeping items, and then I'll introduce Dan. So first, I want to let you know that everyone's phone lines are muted to keep our background noise to a minimum. If you do have questions as we go along, please feel free to ask them at any time by typing them into the questions module on your webinar console, and then we'll answer questions at the end of the webinar. Second, the webinar is being recorded today. We will send out the recording as soon as we have it, probably tomorrow morning. So now I will introduce today's speaker, Dan Cole. Dan, as you can see, is the Director of Product Management here at ThreatConnect. He has spent the last decade as a product manager. From large financial and insurance providers to global telecom carriers to federal agencies, Dan believes that the right software can free organizations to focus on their key missions. So that's it for me. I am going to turn it over to Dan now.
All right, well, Jess, thank you very much, as always, for that warm introduction. I'm going to go ahead and present here. In terms of agenda, I'm going to start by just running down some of the key features available in the latest release of ThreatConnect. We'll get through that fairly quickly because what I'm really excited about today is the actual demo, where we will get hands-on those features before finally finishing up with what is coming next in the immediate subsequent release. But without further ado, I want to dive right into really 4 major features that were just released. And for our private instance customers, if you don't have them yet, you should have them soon as you upgrade to our latest version, which is ThreatConnect 5.6. So the first thing I want to talk about is our revamped search. Not every feature is a brand new shining piece of innovation. Sometimes we have to look back and say, okay, where could we do things better in ThreatConnect? And we talked to a lot of the people on the webinar today. We talked to a lot of our other customers, a lot of our users, looked at the data. And what we found was that search was not doing what people needed it to do. We very much believe that ThreatConnect is meant to be a source of record, a source of truth for the security team. And what that means is that if your team has a question about bad.com, ThreatConnect is supposed to be the one place you can go to and say, okay, what do we know about bad.com? And that's where search comes in, but unfortunately, it just wasn't hitting all the right notes. And you'll see a bit of what I'm talking about when I actually get into the demo. The second feature I'm going to talk about is our new graph view. Threat intelligence, as you know, is a very relational data set. This host resolves to this IP. This IP was used in this incident. This incident was perpetrated by this adversary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And while you've always been able to represent those relationships in ThreatConnect in the data, it wasn't always presented in the most analyst-friendly way. So anyone who's ever used Multigo or i2 Analyst Notebook, this should be a very familiar view to you. So we'll definitely spend some time going through how it works in ThreatConnect. Next up is the new Notifications Center, which is certainly one of the more visible parts of the latest release because it appears on every page. And you've always had the ability to follow a tag, follow an indicator, follow an incident, so that you can be emailed when changes are made to those things. But with the new Notification Center, you'll see that, one, you have a lot more control over what you get notified on, and 2, you have a central place to actually get access to all of those notifications. So all the threats you're following, all the indicators you're trying to keep a hot eye on, this will now be sort of your central place for viewing all the stuff that's going on around those. And then the final thing I'll talk about is the Playbooks ROI calculator. And I know that not every customer on the webinar has Playbooks, and that's okay, because I do think that this is sort of an important concept to talk about as it relates to InfoSec as a whole. And one of the things we're trying to solve with this ROI, this return on investment calculator, is how to measure and demonstrate the value of security. You know, it's not like sales, where if I'm in sales, I can say, you know, last year I sold $10 million, and this year I sold $20 million. It's easy, it's concrete, but in security, you know, it becomes challenging. Like, how can you say, you know, we stopped this many threats, or, you know, you might say we ingested this many indicators, but that's not really a statement of value. So this ROI calculator is the first of many steps we'll be taking going into the future around helping security teams measure and demonstrate value. And those are the 4 things we'll be covering. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and drop out of presentation mode and switch into demo mode. So right now you can see I am on the ThreatConnect dashboard. This is in our public cloud environment. And the first thing I'm going to demonstrate is search. So you'll notice that in the upper right, what used to be a text field is now a magnifying glass. And the reason we did that was this magnifying glass gives you a lot more options on what you can search, how you can search, than the old text field did. So before I actually search in anything, let me just kind of break this down for you. At the top, we've got our search bar where you actually enter your search terms. And I should point out that you can actually enter multiple terms in that text bar. You can also cut and paste. So for example, if you're reading a blog, the blog mentions some indicators, you can cut and paste that entire blog, and it will end up here in search, and it will actually produce results on the indicators that it finds. We have a few filters, which I'll get into in a moment when I actually search. And then we have our search history. Pretty straightforward, but something that we heard from a lot of customers was lacking from the search in ThreatConnect. So let me just execute a quick search on our favorite bad guy, bad.com, and I'll show you a bit about what comes back in the search results. And the first thing you might notice is that it's split into 2 sections, exact matches and potentially related matches. So exact matches, especially important with things like indicators. The search will actually recognize any regexable indicator as an indicator. So if it's a host, an IP address, a file hash, it will recognize that as an indicator and return an exact match. Potentially related matches, these would be things that are kind of semantically similar, or you'll see in a little bit things that might appear in indexed documents. So the next thing I am going to do is I am going to close this out, and I'm going to pull up something from my search history so you can actually see a couple of other things. So here we've got googlesecurity.com, obviously not a legit website, and you can see a couple of things. One, you can see the fact that googlesecurity.com appears in several owners. It appears in CrowdStrike, it appears in Malware Domain Block List, it appears in our common community, and it appears in Acme Corp, which in this case is is our demo organization. We've also provided here the Threat Assess score, which is again kind of like a credit score to assess an indicator's badness. And then down in potentially related matches, we've got the fact that, hey, Google Security appears in a URL indicator, it appears in an attribute on an IP address, and it appears in, again, some documents which, like I said, are indexable. So the next thing I want to point out is one of my personal favorite aspects of search, and it's the file search. So some of you may remember our Analyze feature. The Analyze feature has been removed and is actually now part of search. And what Analyze does is what the name suggests. If you have a log file or a PDF or a text file, it lets you analyze that document by parsing out in the indicators and then telling you what ThreatConnect knows about those indicators. So for example, I've got a Visa security alert about some sort of compromise, and we can read through, we can get the gist of it, we can see that there are some indicators in it. So what I'm going to do now is I can either drag and drop, or I can just click here and upload. And what it's done is it's read through that file, removed any text, and if it's detected any regexable indicators, it's come in and has actually searched on them. So we can see a bunch of file hashes appearing in a number of different owners. But one thing that is really interesting, I think, is it's going to find things that might be indicators that are not actually in ThreatConnect. So, it recognizes that in that PDF, Visa.com was a host. Now, obviously, that is a legitimate website, but if you're reviewing a log file or maybe a blog where you've not already ingested those indicators, this becomes a way to analyze what's in that document, even though it's not in ThreatConnect. So again, these ones with the high threat assess scores, those we've established are already in ThreatConnect, and we can see that they appear in a number of different owners. Whereas these indicators at the bottom, which aren't really indicators because they don't indicate anything, they're just email addresses and hosts, those do not appear in ThreatConnect. And in fact, it says this potential indicator was not found in your search results. But we can learn more about it. So what can we learn? Well, we can first of all see that this particular host, Visa.com, is known to Cal, our collective analytics layer, which basically crowdsources intelligence anonymously from all participating instances of ThreatConnect. So what can we learn from Cal? Well, we can learn that it's got a number of impressions, meaning that analysts have recently looked at it. And if I'm being completely candid, the reason this has impressions is because I was prepping for this demo. This is not obviously an indicator, so it's not something an analyst would really look at. But if they did, they would also see, any false positives. And, let's say you bring in a junior analyst or an intern who maybe doesn't know that Visa.com is not malicious. They can take a look and see that, oh, it's got a pretty high Alexa rank. And voila, that should probably clue them in that this is not a malicious website. If we scroll down, we also give you obviously access to all of our various investigation links. So if I wanted to look this up in VirusTotal, I could come in and see what VirusTotal knows about Visa.com. So the next thing I want to point out is, let's say that you're looking at some of these quote-unquote potential indicators, and you've decided, I would like to add this to ThreatConnect. Well, there's a plus button, and that gives you the option to add Visa.com to an owner in ThreatConnect. So you click on it, you've learned more about it. Maybe Cal says, it's not ranked on Alexa. Maybe Cal says a lot of analysts are looking at it. It's gotten a lot of observations on various networks around the globe. Maybe I do want to add it. Again, you just click the plus button and say, okay, I'm going to add it to my org. And you can even see right away, we can see that now it is present as an indicator in Acme Corp, which again is my org. So unlike the old search where you might have hit a dead end, the new search will actually return results on indicators, even if they're not yet in ThreatConnect. So it becomes almost like a leaping off point for an investigation. I'm going to scroll back up here to the top. One last thing I do want to point out about search is very often we deal with defanged indicators. So what we can see here is an indicator that is defanged. It's got the brackets around the dot. It's got HTTP removed, and what I'm going to do is just paste it in. And ThreatConnect will automatically, I guess the term is refang that indicator. So unlike the old search or the old analyze, you no longer need to manually refang those indicators. It will simply recognize it, search, and go from there. And that's search. I think you'll find it's a vast improvement. A lot going on here, a lot of additional pathways to learn more about what is available in ThreatConnect. The search history makes it a lot easier to come back to look for common things. And speaking of which, I'm going to use this as kind of a leaping off point to showcase the next looks like I'm having some internet trouble here. Bear with me just a moment. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm going to use search as a leaping off point to the next thing I want to showcase, which is the graph view. So I just uploaded that Visa security bulletin, and I want to come take a look at this file hash. So when looking at this file hash, I want to see what it is actually associated to. And you may remember that on the overview page, we have this list of all the things that this file hash is tied to. So you can see it's tied to these groups, it's tied to this incident, it's tied to these indicators, etc. And that list is still present, but now we've also added a graph view, which again should be familiar to anyone who has ever used Maltego, for example. So I'm going to bring this full screen so we can actually start to interact with this graph. So let's take a look at what we can do here. First thing of note is that everything in this graph is color-coded. So sort of the blues, we've got different indicator types. In the purple family, we've got different types of groups. And finally, green is used to represent tags. And I'll show you another cool thing you can do with this legend in just a moment. But we can see what we've got here is we've got one document, we've got an incident, and at the center is the file hash that we actually started with. So what can we do here? If I click on a node, I can do a couple of things. I can view details. So without needing to actually leave my sort of pivot point, this file hash, I can view additional details on this incident that this file hash is associated to, so I can get additional context without needing to lose or leave my view. I can also pivot. So if I want to see groups, other groups that this particular incident is associated to, I can do that as well. So I can see that it's tied to Carbonac, an adversary. I can see that it's tied to a document. In this case, the original PDF that we searched on. I can also pivot on indicators. So I can see all of the different indicators that it is tied to as well. And we can repeat this kind of ad nauseum to continue to build out the graph. But one thing I actually want to do is kind of reset to the beginning here, because one thing you might be asking is, if I want to explore these relationships, do I have to click on, in this case, all 5 nodes multiple times? And the answer is no, and that's where this comes in. So we've got a couple of options. Obviously, mouse scroll wheel zooming, pretty straightforward. Turning this on lets me zoom in and out using my mouse scroll wheel. But in my opinion, one of the most important things we have here is this, second-level associations. What we're looking at right now is first-level associations. So the things that are 1 degree out from our original file hash. If I turn on second-level associations, now I can see everything that is associated to this original file hash. I can see what it's associated to. So I can see out here a big cluster of indicators associated to, in this case, a tag. I can see another group associated to a tag along with some indicators, some additional intelligence reports. Obviously, I can zoom in and out. I can drag it around. And one area, especially when dealing with kind of large graphs like this, one area where the legend comes in handy is that if you hover, it will actually highlight it should highlight. There we go. I think I've got my shift key stuck down. What it's going to do is actually highlight any matching intelligence types that match what you're hovering over. So if you're looking for signatures, hover over signatures, it will reveal signatures. So let's dive in. Let's take a look at this. And what we can see here is a tag, again, tied to our original file hash. We've got this little purple guy hanging out here in this cluster of not purple guys. And if we take a look, we see that it is an incident. Again, probably tied to this file hash, which again, originally came from that Visa threat report that we took a look at. So I'm going to go ahead and pivot on, see if there are any groups associated with this CREBS. Again, we can see the Carbonac adversary, and we can also see a signature if this is something I want to download and then deploy to my defensive devices. But let's be honest, this is a lot of nodes to look at once. So we do give you a lot of control over what is shown in the graph view. So, for example, let's say that I'm only interested in tags and groups. I don't care about indicators at this stage. I just want to know, what is the story to be told here around all of the various relationships. So when I hit apply, we can again see our original file hash, but then all those big indicator clusters disappear, and we can start to see just the groups that make up this particular story. So again, maybe now you can see a little bit better. When I hover over adversary or reports, you can see that there's 3 reports, or actually 6 reports highlighted here. Event, intrusion set, incident, these are all available just by hovering over to see where they appear in the graph. And already here, we can see that what started as a Visa threat report and was initially linked to by this hash, we can now see it's kind of linked together by Carbonac to a number of other point of sale attacks and incidents. So a lot of different questions you can ask of this graph, a lot of different answers you can get from this graph. And the final thing I will say about it is that it does include the ability to export to PNG. So if this is something you're using Confluence to produce threat reports, if you want to email this to somebody, it does let you export the actual graph so that you can include it when discussing the particular threat. So that is the graph view. And the next thing I want to take a look at is notifications. So you'll notice that in the upper right, there's now a bell with a little orange indicator around it. So just like Facebook, Instagram, any number of tools out there, this should be pretty familiar to most people. When I click on it, I can see a list of all recent activity tied to the different objects that I am following. So, for example, I am following, well, actually, let's use the graph view and actually dive in. I'm going to come in and take a look at this incident report on this Oracle breach. And you'll notice that in the upper right, there is a button that says Follow Item. I'm going to click on that, and it gives me the option to select from one of 3 different notification priorities: high, medium, and low. And we'll get to what those mean in a second, but for now, all you should really know is that if this is, something super critical, maybe tied to high-risk infrastructure that I absolutely positively need to keep an eye on, I probably want to switch it to high, versus if it's something that, it's kind of on the back burner, but I still want to get notifications on, probably want to keep it on low. And then I'm going to come in here. There we go. And so now, anytime that something happens to this particular incident, I am going to get a notification that, hey, something happened. So I click here. And so you can see again that a number of posts were associated to this particular incident report. Whoops. And let me just kind of take you on a quick tour of the notifications center. So we can see all of the notifications on all the activity on all of the different objects that I am following. We can see that the ones with orange are ones that I have not yet read. So if I take a look at this and say I'm not interested, I can just mark it as red, I can delete it, or I can mark all as red. Pretty straightforward. But let's say, it's a bad day, I'm inundated, I only want to see things that are high priority. I can do that, and it filters the list down to only things that are high priority. I can also set that to only show hosts or only show incidents, or only show things that are read versus unread. But let's talk a bit about what makes something high priority versus low priority. Well, what that priority does is it informs what happens when one of those notifications are triggered. So you can see here, when I set something to high, what that means is that I want an immediate push notification, and I want an immediate email. Versus low priority, all I really want is a daily email digest. I frankly don't really care. I don't need an immediate email around my lowest priority things. Most people will probably just use this, probably just use the default. But if you wanted to set up different notification schemes around tags, for example, you could definitely use a different scheme for tags. So for example, maybe tags on high, you don't want immediate push notifications, you just want that email. And on medium notifications, maybe you just want the summary, and low notifications, you don't want anything. Entirely up to you. We give you a lot of control over what you're notified on, how often, and again, everything that happens is now listed in this notification center, so you don't need to worry about missing an email or being inundated. It's all here. It's all filterable. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the Playbooks ROI calculator. And for that, I'm going to switch to our demo environment, which has Playbooks up and running. And I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to take a look at one of my playbooks. And the first thing you'll notice is that there is a brand new section called Playbook ROI. And what Playbook ROI is designed to do is basically count executions and show you how much time and how much money this playbook is saving. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you have a phishing triage playbook, and it's designed to automate the process of phishing triage. Maybe you grab an email, you parse it for indicators, you run each indicator through 3 different enrichment tools, you log it as an incident, and when all is said and done, if a human were to do that, maybe that takes 30 minutes per email. Or maybe you have a super fast analyst that takes them 10 minutes, whatever. When you turn that 30-minute process into a playbook, which is more or less instantaneous, you've now saved 30 minutes plus however much money that analyst's time would cost you. Not just in terms of the analyst's cost to the business, but the fact that that analyst is basically doing a manual, tedious task instead of focusing on analysis. So when I come to the options for this playbook, you can see it gives me an option to define minutes and a rate per hour. So maybe this particular phishing triage takes 30 minutes, and maybe I'm working with a contracted IT firm, and this playbook is saving me $300 or pounds or euros per hour. I can set those values per playbook so that when it runs, it will then give me overall savings, overall time saved, and also give me a breakdown over the past 70, 30, 60, 90 days, how much time and how much money this playbook has saved me. And we have customers who are running dozens of playbooks at 50,000 executions per day. It definitely adds up. And this becomes not just a tool to sort of monitor playbooks, it becomes a tool you can use to measure and justify the investment you've made into automating these different tasks, and how much time you've been able to refocus onto letting your analysts focus on the tasks of analysis. The final thing I will say about the ROI calculator is that those metrics are not just available in playbooks themselves, they are also available on the dashboard. So if I come in here, and I'm going to create a new dashboard called Playbooks Monitoring, I'm going to add a card to it. Under metrics, you now have 3 new playbook-specific metrics: execution count, financial savings, and hours saved. So maybe I want to track hours saved over time. Got a couple of things going on here. You can see that over the past 7 days, it's tracking 3 different playbooks and how many hours have been saved by those playbooks in that time period. I can do a couple of things here. I can specify specific playbooks, and I'll show you the next thing you can do in just a second. You can add that there. And that shows me the breakdown, again, per playbook, how many hours have been saved per day. But let's say that I just want a total count of executions of all playbooks for the current day. Well, I just click on Sum across all playbooks, and rather than giving me a breakdown for all of my playbooks, it just shows me my total playbook execution count for that current day. Save and save. You can also adjust that to filter and only show specific playbooks. So for example, maybe I have certain playbooks that are designed to monitor critical systems health. I can create a dashboard card that only shows executions of those critical playbooks. So this dashboard now becomes not just a measurement of ROI, time and dollars saved, but a health check around what my ThreatConnect is doing in terms of playbooks. So that covers the 4 big features in 5.6. There's a lot more going on. If you don't have a copy of our release notes, I encourage you to check with your customer success rep because, again, there's a lot going on there. And most importantly, I encourage you to explore the features we've gone over today. I can click through them, I can talk about them, but really at the end of the day, what I want is your feedback based on getting hands-on with these new features. So the last thing I want to talk about is what's coming next. We're not going to go, this is not a full roadmap briefing, this is not going far off into the future. This is just our next release. So I kind of teased it at the end there when talking about the dashboards in terms of how you can use ThreatConnect to monitor playbook executions, critical systems, etc. In our next release, we're taking that a bit further because, like I said, we've seen so many customers who are running tens of thousands of playbooks per day. Just like any other systems monitoring, there becomes a need to monitor executions. So we'll be implementing the ability to monitor quality of service for playbooks. So you'll be able to see for all your playbooks across however many environments you're running them on, how many are running, what is the queue size, which playbooks are running now, which ones just ran, which ones are queued to run next, as well as give you the ability to kill and restart playbooks. So we really take it from just automation to a full-on orchestration capability where you can use playbooks as kind of the centerpiece of coordinating all the back and forth flow of your various integrations and systems. And speaking of playbooks, another thing we've got coming out is a revamp of the playbooks listing page. That is this page right here. This page is about 2 years old at this point. We've gotten a lot of feedback on ways we could improve it, and we've taken them to heart. So, for example, we see customers who have 50 playbooks, many of them in multiple stages of development. So they'll have, you know, this is one that's in design, this one is in QA, this one's in production, this one's been deprecated. And I've seen customers get pretty creative with how they name their playbooks to track those kinds of things. But rather than needing to rely on creative names, in the next release, you'll be able to actually tag, label, organize, and filter your playbooks. Again, all in the name of getting better organized and making playbooks a more powerful tool for actually orchestrating all of your different processes and the different pieces of software you've integrated with ThreatConnect. So that's the taste of the next release. That's a coverage of what we just came out with and should be rolling out to your instances soon if they haven't already. But now I want to take a brief pause to answer any questions that may have come in. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them.
Thanks, Dan. We did have a question about the recording, and yes, we'll be sending it out probably sometime tomorrow. You can look for that in your inbox. All right, next question. This question is from Danny. With the graph view, are you going to stop supporting Maltego transforms?
Very good question. So with the graph view, are we going to stop supporting Maltego transforms? The short answer is no. We will continue to support, we will continue building and supporting our Maltego transforms because really we see the graph view and Maltego as being complementary. You know, where Maltego is very much about investigation and, you know, building out that graph. The graph view in ThreatConnect is primarily a better, more useful, more understandable way of viewing the data in ThreatConnect. It's about, you know, getting access to, you know, ThreatConnect is your source of truth. That graph is a visual representation of your source of truth. So, you know, the way I like to think about it is, you know, you've got Google Drive that lets you store files online. You know, that does not make the concept of email attachments obsolete. They're, in fact, complementary. Same with the graph view and ThreatConnect and Maltego. So, no, we do not plan to stop supporting Maltego transforms. We view them as complementary.
Okay, great. Next question. You talked about distributing Playbook load across multiple servers. How are those configured and set up?
Good question. So I'm guessing that is in reference to one of the slides and also some of the things we teased in the next release. And so let's talk about the next release and how that's going to work. In the next release, 5.7, you will actually be able to go to the environment configuration section of Playbooks. Once there, you will be able to configure what we call an environment server to your specific needs. You will then be able to either download the configuration for that server or the entire server itself and then run that server from the command line. So really everything is set-upable, runnable, and monitorable from the ThreatConnect UI. The only time you need to break from that is actually going to the command line to execute the server in your local environment. But that entire process is getting greatly streamlined in 5.7.
Okay, great. We have another question from Mark. Is there a limit to the size of the graph in Graph View?
That is a good question. There is a limit, especially because it's running in the browser. It does get computationally intensive. I believe that limit is something like 2,000 nodes. It's either 2,000 or 3,000. But really, the limit is less about the number of nodes that the browser can display, which again is, I believe, 2,000. It's more about, how many can a human make sense of on the screen at once. And in fact, that's why we give you those sliders that I showed to actually limit and control everything that is displayed on the graph view so it doesn't become too overwhelming. So again, in terms of size, the limit is 2,000, but again, before you really hit that limit, it's just a lot for an analyst to be able to interpret on screen.
Makes sense. Okay, and we have another question here from Stephanie. Can the default values for the ROI calculator be changed?
Good question. So the defaults for all playbooks ship out of the box with, I think, 10 minutes per execution and $75 or monetary units per execution. Those can be tweaked per playbook to differ from the default, but you can also change that default in system settings of ThreatConnect. So long as it's short, yes, you can change those defaults. It's in system settings.
Okay, great. That is all the questions we have right now. If you have any more, feel free to send them to me. I'm going to take over the screen again here, Dan, and just show a couple more slides real quick. For those of you who are not on our Slack channel yet, we do have one for customers only. I'll send out, it's a really long link, and GoToWebinar doesn't really let attendees click on links in there. So I'm going to send that out in the follow-up email if you're not on our Slack channel. We'd love to have you join us. And also, if you are going to be at Black Hat this year, we will be there. We'll be at booth number 1414. And we'll be giving out a new t-shirt that is Star Wars themed. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that yet, but a little teaser. So stop by our booth and get one. And we're also having a party on Thursday night, August 9th. So I will send out the link to register for the party in the follow-up email as well. So you can look forward to those coming your way. And I don't see any more questions coming in. So if you do have any, feel free to email them to us or reach out to your customer success rep. And we will get those answered for you. And thank you so much, Dan. That was great today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we will talk to you all soon. Bye, everyone.